On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council. Years of previous attempts at changing Assad's behavior have all failed, and failed very dramatically. As a result, the refugee crisis continues to deepen, and the region continues to destabilize, threatening the United States and its allies. Tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking to end the slaughter and bloodshed in Syria, and also to end terrorism of all kinds and all types. We ask for God's wisdom as we face the challenge of our very troubled world. We pray for the lives of the wounded and for the souls of those who have passed. And we hope that as long as America stands for justice, then peace and harmony will, in the end, prevail. Good night, and God bless America and the entire world. Thank you.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly. In the Impact segment tonight, will there be a war in Syria? As you may know, the tyrant Assad, who runs that country, fighting a civil war to keep power, aided by Russia. This week, Assad used poison gas, allegedly, to kill men, women, and children. At least 86 people have died. That prompted this from the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
When the United Nations consistently fails in its duty to act collectively, there are times in the life of states that we are compelled to take our own action. For the sake of the victims, I hope the rest of the Council is finally willing to do the same.
Joining us now from Washington, Christopher Harmer, Senior Naval Analyst at the Institute for the Study of War. And from Boston, Fox News military analyst Colonel David Hunt, author of the new book, Without Mercy. So, Colonel Hunt, what do you think is going to happen here?
What I think is going to happen is the Secretary of Defense is going to meet this weekend, talk to the President, and ask or tell him there's two options, a strategic or a tactical. What I mean is, one is wipe the entire Air Force off the map of Assad's air, if we are sure that Assad did this, or a smaller tactical strike in which you just take out airfields or a couple of planes. It sounds to me like we are laying the groundwork from the ambassador, as you just showed, and from Tillerson, who's already talked, and from the President to do something. The issue is going to be, though, we've got U.S. forces already on the ground. If we do this against Assad, there are definitely going to be consequences and put U.S. forces who are already deep inside Syria at risk.
There's about 1,000 U.S. troops, I understand, there. But when you say they're going to put them at risk, how? I mean, the bombs aren't going to fall on them. I mean, they're going to be targeted at the Air Force, which isn't that big, by the way. estimate it would take 1 day for U.S. forces to knock out the Syrian Air Force, right?
Okay. The U.S. forces on the ground, that has been coordinated with Assad's forces and the Russians. We just didn't pop in with Rangers, 82nd Airborne, and Marines. That's coordinated. If we bomb Assad for this reason, and by the way, he's been killing his own kids for years.
Right.
But if we do this, the U.S. forces lose that coordination effort, and it puts them in danger. They're already in the middle of 6 countries that are at war in the middle of Syria. It's a very dangerous place to begin with. This will heighten it, and that's got to be a consideration.
All right, Mr. Harmer, do you see it that way?
No, not at all. I don't see any heightened risk to U.S. forces already in theater. They're already in country. They're already fighting. The people that they are fighting against are overwhelmingly ISIS and al-Qaeda. ISIS and al-Qaeda are not the targets of this potential strike. The targets of this potential strike are the ability of the Assad regime to deliver chemical weapons, specifically his Air Force. So I think in a relatively short period of time, 1 night, maybe 2, we could destroy the entirety of the Syrian Air Force. Prior to the war, they were fairly big, fairly capable. After 6 years of civil war, the Syrian Air Force has been attrited fairly significantly. I just don't think this is this heavy of a lift. Now, coming from a Marine Corps infantry background, I'm certainly sympathetic to the men on the ground. I don't want to place them at any further risk. I don't see that a strike against the Syrian Air Force places U.S. forces already
Colonel
in
Hunt's
country.
point is this, that if Assad is allowing transit, for example, of U.S. forces from Iraq into his country, not impeding that's the deal, okay, that he wouldn't do that anymore, and that it would be more difficult, that his troops might even open fire on our troops if they found them. So certainly Assad's not going to be happy that the U.S. is bombing his airfield, so conceivably that could happen, not?
Yeah, certainly anything's conceivable. I can't imagine, however, that Bashar Assad, with an extraordinarily small and shrinking army that's suffering severely from both attrition and defections, is going to escalate against the United States of America.
Well, it's a gamble now. Now, if their military action does launch, Colonel Hunt, Russian planes are there too, right? Aren't Russian planes there?
There's not only Russian planes, there's Russian on the ground. And by the way, as my friends should know, there's a lot more than 1,000 soldiers in the middle of Syria. We got 6,000 in Mosul. The point I'm trying to make is it's already bad enough where there are 6 different armies and 10 terrorist organizations in the middle of this. And it's tenuous for the U.S. soldiers at point. And bombs, although these can be surgical, can be rather indiscriminate. And again, how about we kill a couple of Russians or hit a Russian aircraft?
So you'd have to let Russia know ahead of time what was going to happen.
Exactly.
But if they don't do anything, Colonel Hunt, if President Trump doesn't do anything, he becomes like President Obama. They let the gas go. Assad has a history of it. He had he said he destroyed his cache of outlawed gas weapons. That's not true. All Israeli intel and U.S. intel know that. So if we let it go, then Trump looks weak. He looks like Obama, no?
Now, I understand how the politics of this could work. I'm also not convinced that this is Assad. Why would he do this? This sounds to me more like rebels. This stuff was done in Sarajevo. However, if this turns out to be them, understand that we're changing the nature of the game. And that is unpredictable. Again, Turkey's got 2 armies in there and everybody else.
I don't think you can stand by.
You got to consider it.
Yeah, I don't think you can stand by and do nothing. I don't know if bombing is the right thing to do, but I think you have to do something. We'll give you the last word, Mr. Harmer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the days of collateral damage are significantly reduced. We're talking about Tomahawk cruise missiles that have a range of 1,000 nautical miles and an accuracy within 1 meter, and we're talking about a 98, 99% success ratio in there. I just don't see how U.S. forces are placed at risk by this. I don't see how Russian forces are placed at risk by this. The other thing regarding who actually conducted this attack, we've got hundreds of survivors that said this attack was conducted by fixed-wing aircraft. None of the rebels have fixed-wing aircraft. The idea that this is a false flag operation simply is not supported by the facts.
All right, gentlemen, good discussion. We appreciate it. One footnote.
Just gotten this from Associated Press. A Syrian official tells the AP that the U.S. missile strike that hit a number of military targets in central Syria has left a number of people dead and wounded. The governor of Homs province did not say how many were killed in the early pre-dawn Friday attack. He did say a fire raged in the air base in Homs and over an hour following the missile barrage. The governor says the evacuation and transfer of casualties is ongoing. He called the air base, which is about 45 kilometers or 28 miles east of the city of Homs, a supporting base for Syria's fight against terrorism. Islamic group militants operate in the central Homs province. Activists and rebels say that that base serves as one of the government's most active launching pad for airstrikes on all rebel areas in central and northern Syria. Its government calls all armed groups terrorists. I should tell you that that is the very base from which it is believed, excuse me, it's been a few hours, from which it's believed the Syrian forces launched that sarin gas attack, which ended up killing some 80 people, including 27 children. It is from that base that the terror attack was launched that President Trump now says was the reason for the U.S. retaliation. Jennifer Griffin is live at her position.
Analysis now from retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, thanks for coming in. First of all, I want to ask you about the confidence. Do you think there is confidence that they can pinpoint that this chemical weapons drop came from Assad forces?
Yeah, they've got high confidence. They've got witness testimony on the ground, observing aircraft above, explosions after that. We've got radar that puts the aircraft over the target. All of that airspace there, we cover down 24/7 on. And we've got U.S. intelligence reports that confirm both of those incidents. So we have high confidence.
All right, so there are people out there saying, you know, what is the upside here? And it seems like there's a lot of downside. Talk to me about an operation and how it might work. Jennifer touched on some of that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you begin with your overall strategy. What are you trying to accomplish here? What's your political end state? Tillerson is talking about that already in terms of some kind of regime change. This military operation will certainly reduce his capacity to continue to do operations like this. That means air power and further define air power infrastructure. What is that? He's got about 6 operational airfields that Assad uses. His infrastructure to support air power are not the obvious, just the airplanes and the runways, but they are fuel storage, ammo depots, spare parts and maintenance warehouses. We would take all of that out at those 6 airfields.
From Tomahawk missiles in the Navy, not air-to-air, like...
It would be standoff cruise missiles delivered from surface and subsurface ships. We would not have to fly a single airplane into Syria. We would not have to deal with Russian missile defense or Syrian missile defense. It'd take it right off the issue. We would not have to have any air-to-air confrontation with Russian airplanes. Take that confrontation off the table. So what we're doing is a pretty clean operation. We could actually take down all 6 airfields with all those targets because of our capability, Brett, in one night. Whether we would do that or not remains to be seen.
Right, but where the policy goes from there, I guess Jennifer mentioned we do have U.S. special operators on the ground in Syria, both to the south and north of Raqqa. That has to factor in.
Well, they wouldn't be anywhere near where we're conducting these operations to begin with. And I do think we should never lose sight of the fact that we're taking ISIS down, and as soon as we take that down, is also going to be a powerful factor in Syria. And, you know, we just had 3 great visits from the Arab states here with Assisi, who you interviewed, King Abdullah, and also Mohammed bin Salman, the Deputy Crown Prince. What has happened is the traditional and historical relationship with our Sunni Arabs has been revitalized. We've returned to that relationship. Bring them into this. Make them a part of it. They wanted to be a part of this before, and President Obama would not let them be a part of it.
But on Russia, how tied is Vladimir Putin to Bashar al-Assad? Or is he okay if Assad goes away after some negotiation?
Yeah, he would likely not want to see him go, but he would give him up to maintain the Alawite infrastructure. The Iranians are a little closer invested personally in Assad, so there could be some tension over that. But at some point, pressure put on Putin, he would give up Assad. But even if he gave up Assad, from a Syria perspective, from the Syrian people, and also from our own national interests, we just trade one thug for another.
Well, I just want to ask you really quickly about 2 tweets, and this is back to 2013. This is Donald J. Trump as civilian. August, if Obama attacks Syria and innocent civilians are hurt and killed, he and the U.S. will look very bad. September 5th, the only reason President Obama wants to attack Syria is to save face over his very dumb red line statement, do not attack Syria, fix USA. Obviously, he was in a different position then than he is now, but clearly he campaigned on a different foreign policy stance if this is what actually happens.
You know, I think, you know, what is happening to him is, I think it happens to most people who go into that office. I mean, he certainly burdened, like all of us, from a personal human perspective, seeing a horrific attack on these kids and people's lifestyles like that. But now, what's different for him? He has accountability and he's got responsibility, and that is sobering. And I think that is what is driving him to take some action on behalf of the American people's interest, the stability of the region, and the fact that we have, if you don't take action, you're actually underwriting the use of chemical weapons. And is that a position the United States wants to be in? I think he's saying, no, we got to do something.
We will see. General Keane, as always, thank you.
Members of the Joint Chiefs came together. The president was briefed on options. And tonight, as the president is meeting with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping at his resort in South Florida in the Palm Beaches, we got the word that the United States has launched a military attack, Tomahawk missiles, on Syria. We're expecting to hear from President Trump shortly. Our senior White House correspondent John Roberts is live at Mar-a-Lago in South Florida, where we await word. John?
And Shep, I've just been told by a senior administration official that President Trump did not call Russian President Vladimir Putin prior to these cruise missiles being launched at Syria. We had thought, Jennifer Griffin and I were discussing this earlier tonight, that perhaps because of the fact that there are so many Russians who are in that country, and Russians who might have been, as Jennifer Griffin was saying a short time ago, manning some of those anti-aircraft batteries, that the president might in some way telegraph to the Russian leader what was about to happen, not necessarily to seek his permission for it, but to say, you've got a lot of people in that country, tell them to take cover. But apparently there was no direct contact between the president and Vladimir Putin, though we should probably say that the posture of the United States over the last few hours has been such that any military leader worth their salt would probably get a good idea that something was on the way. Now, how did the president come to this decision? We're still expecting to hear more about this tonight in terms of the actual tick-tock. But about a week ago, his ambassador to the United Nations telegraphed that regime change in Syria was no longer the top priority in that country for the United States, which Bashar al-Assad may have seen as a green light that he could start attacking his own people with impunity. That climaxed on Tuesday into Wednesday with reports of that sarin gas attack that killed so many civilians. President Trump saw that, and you can't help but look at those pictures of the children and the babies who are dying and suffering so horribly. It's the sort of pictures that could just bring tears to your eyes. And when he appeared with King Abdullah at the White House on Wednesday afternoon, the president said that he had been impacted very strongly by those images and that he was completely rethinking his approach to Bashar al-Assad. And now, Shep, tonight we see 40-some-odd cruise missiles being fired at military facilities in that country. Shep?
John Roberts, thanks. Stand by. Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon. Jennifer, talk to us about how the United States Navy prepared and practiced for this.
Well, Shepard, we've just learned from a Pentagon spokesman, Captain Jeff Davis, described to us how, in fact, the sailors on board the USS Porter and USS Ross prepared for 2 days prior to the launch of those Tomahawk missiles. They did things such as prepare by inserting the coordinates of that airbase, Shariat Air Base in Syria, into the Tomahawk. Those Tomahawk missiles, those TLAM missiles, have to be pre-programmed before they are launched. So they went through the drills so that they would be ready when given the orders to launch the strikes. On board those 2 destroyers who were in the Eastern Mediterranean tonight, we've reported that they were each carrying up to 70 Tomahawk missiles altogether. They ended up firing 59 Tomahawk missiles at a very small area inside Syria at that Shariat Air Base just outside Homs. It's about 120 miles from where the sarin nerve gas attack occurred 72 hours ago. The reason that that air base was chosen as the target, we're told, and John Roberts has been reporting from down at Mar-a-Lago, the reason it was chosen is that there is intelligence suggesting that is where the Syrian plane was loaded with the chemical agents, the sarin gas, inside the bomb that was dropped on Tuesday on those innocent women and children as they slept. And so this air base was chosen for the very reason that in the past chemical weapons have been stored there. Prior to 2013, there were large weapon stores there. We've also learned from the Pentagon that they took great lengths not to actually hit the remaining chemical agents that are stored at the base. And we also have tonight, we've learned from the Pentagon, Shepard, that they have released in real time, they could see the flight path of that Syrian plane as it made its way to the village Khan Sheikhoun, where the sarin gas was dropped on Tuesday, and they have released the flight path of that Syrian plane. And as Brett Baer and John Roberts have reported tonight, we now know that Western intelligence and U.S. intelligence knew that the Russians knew in real time that the Syrians were actually loading those chemical weapons onto that plane. So that, I think, was a real turning point for both the Pentagon as well as the president and his national security staff when they received that intelligence that the Russians, in fact, were aware that the Assad regime was going to drop these chemical weapons. So this particular base was chosen for a very specific reason. And think about it, Shep, these are 59 1,000-pound bombs, if you will. They're missiles, Tomahawk missiles, that landed in this small space within this airfield and striking these hangars and airplanes at this air base. Each one of those Tomahawks cost about $1 million, so that's $59 million in munitions that were expended tonight to drop the weaponry on this air base and to send this signal to the Assad regime that using chemical weapons would not be tolerated. And those Tomahawks, they fly at about 500 miles per hour. They are 18 feet long. Each Tomahawk is 18 feet long, 2 feet wide. It's really like a flying telephone pole. It's been described that way to me. And they can be seen with the naked eye as they're moving along. And it could have taken upwards of 30 to 40 minutes for them to fly from the USS Porter and the USS Ross, which have been based in the Mediterranean.
Wow.
Shepard.
Jennifer, you mentioned they've been preparing for this for a couple of days. Out of curiosity, are they preparing for the possibility that the Assad regime strikes again and the United States might have to act again, or is that not part of this?
I don't believe that at this moment they believe that the Assad regime would be so bold as to act again. Certainly, I think if you look at this, what the Pentagon is describing as a proportional strike and what I would describe as a limited strike on this one air base, they have the means to escalate. If the Assad regime uses chemical weapons again, or even uses its air force with barrel bombs again, I would not be surprised to see the U.S. military react, because, again, this is designed to send a message to Assad to stop killing his own people. It is a message that is long overdue. As you've been reporting for 7 years now, and we've been reporting, 450,000 civilians have been killed in Syria. 7 years, and nothing has stopped the Assad regime from continuing with the killing. But I believe at this point in time, we know that 59 of the 70 Tomahawks have been used by these two American destroyers that are in the eastern Mediterranean. They certainly could resupply at Suda Bay on the island of Crete in Greece. That's where they load the Tomahawks onto the destroyers. It's also notable, Shep, that the Navy 2 years ago in 2015, they forward deployed 4 destroyers to Rota, Spain, because they, for the first time in many years, they felt the need to have a U.S. Navy presence in the Mediterranean. So this has all been part of the pre-positioning of naval assets in the event that this day would come. Shepard.
Jennifer Griffin, with all the information from the Pentagon tonight. Jennifer, appreciate it very much.
North Korea may be even closer to having the ability to attack the continental U.S. than generally believed. That is according to several sources. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has that story from Seoul, South Korea.
Even on a busy Thursday in Seoul, South Koreans are still aware of the menace across the DMZ some 35 miles away.
North Korea nuclear is very dangerous.
Kim Jong-un and his arsenal of nukes and missiles have been branded an imminent threat by the White House. No wonder it tops the agenda at the summit between President Trump and Chinese President Xi.
This is a threat of both rhetoric and growing capability.
This week's mid-range missile test, a sign of Pyongyang's growing strategic prowess. An expert confirms to Fox News the North could produce a ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead capable of hitting mainland U.S. by the end of President Trump's first term.
Well, North Korea is dangerous, certainly for South Korea, to the region as a whole, and at the same time, even to the United States.
Han Sung-ju has dealt with the North Korean crisis during his time as South Korean foreign minister and ambassador to the U.S. His hopes for the U.S.-China summit?
They will certainly agree on the seriousness of the problem, but I don't think they'll be able to come up with any magical solution.
He does think further talks could force China to push ally North Korea in the right direction, if only because the alternative, that military option which the Trump administration says remains on the table, is so unthinkable.
It portends so much risk, and also it will invite a lot of sacrifice.
With some 25 million in South Korea within artillery range of the North, including Americans, others are also hoping for the best.
So the problem is, it will be good. Solving the problem would be good.
Interestingly, for many here, the wild card in the summit and the ongoing conflict with North Korea is not the Chinese president, not Kim Jong-un, but in fact President Trump. He is indeed the new kid on this potentially dangerous bloc. Brett.
Greg Palcott in Seoul, South Korea. Greg, thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. A good week for President Trump. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. If you have noticed an uptick in the media Trump hatred, it is no accident. After a few rocky weeks, the president has had a very good few days. He met with the president of Egypt and the king of Jordan, both men praising him lavishly. This is important because Egypt and Jordan are helping America in the fight against ISIS. Also, Mr. Trump got an enormous break when the Susan Rice story hit. Whether the former national security advisor under President Obama did anything wrong or not, story has taken attention away from allegations about the Russia-Trump campaign stuff. So even though the left-wing media doesn't want to cover the Susan Rice story, that's obvious, fair news agencies like the Fox News Channel are discussing it, and the American people are aware of it. That helps deflect liberal bias against President Trump. And then there is the looming appointment of Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Democrats in the Senate blocked a vote today, but now Republicans have changed the rules, and the judge is likely to be confirmed tomorrow. That's a big win for President Trump, because the judge is a traditional man who will not rule on his own political beliefs, as some Supreme Court justices now do. Gorsuch is despised on the left because they know he could be on the court for decades, and he's not going to carry water for anyone. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some conservative Americans are disappointed by Justice Gorsuch because he's not a political guy. All in all, President Trump has nominated a fair man to the court, a person who will not buy into the myth that the United States needs to be changed in dramatic ways. Finally, Mr. Trump will meet with Chinese president, an avowed communist, over the next few days in Palm Beach, Florida. I don't know if there are any other communists in Palm Beach, maybe, as he hopes to get China's help to subdue North Korea, which has become a major threat to the world. Trump also wants to modify trade deals so more American products are sold in China, which is the most populated country on earth, nearly 1.5 billion people. So things have gone very well this week for Donald Trump. But as you know, every day is an adventure. However, it's safe to say the Trump haters are very frustrated this evening. And that's a memo. Now, for the top story tonight, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, now saying he's stepping aside for the committee's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. Mr. Nunes, under heavy pressure for going to the White House before he briefed his fellow committee members on surveillance information that he was given. Joining us from Arlington, Virginia, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who knows how these things work. So were you surprised Nunes stepped aside?
Yeah, I was. I talked with him today, and he And he has a good rational reason that he doesn't want his fellow members to go home and spend the next 2 weeks answering questions about him, and so he simply stepped to one side. Now that puts Trey Gowdy, who knows a great deal about investigations, in a key position on the Russian thing. Nunes is still chairman of the full committee. It's probably not what I would have done, but I respect his reasoning and why he did it, and he did it to protect his fellow Republicans.
Now, the pressure on him was enormous, so I think the left will claim a victory there, will they not?
Sure, but look, it's all garbage. The two groups that filed against him, one of them was MoveOn.org. The things they filed are absurd. The Ethics Committee, frankly, should cut them off and not allow them to ever again file, because what they're doing is so blatantly political. And I think in that sense, Nunes probably would have been better off historically to just shrugged it off and kept moving.
Okay.
I don't think Republicans can afford to recuse themselves every time some left-wing group smears them. And I think with the Attorney General recusing himself, with Nunes recusing himself, this is not a good habit to get into.
Now, the Susan Rice story. Again, were you surprised when that broke? And how do you assess it as it stands now? No speculation zone here, Mr. Speaker.
Look, you and I are both old enough to remember Watergate. Watergate was a physical break-in of a campaign headquarters and ultimately left people going to jail and Richard Nixon resigning from the presidency. Now, this is the equivalent of electronic Watergate. This is electronically eavesdropping on the transition team for the other party after they won the election. Apparently, the National Security Advisor was requesting it. If it is not illegal, it sure should be illegal. This is insanity. You cannot have the instrument of the government used to eavesdrop on your opponents without enormous long-term destruction.
Well, that's a pretty bold.
And Susan Rice's case, look, she's a liar.
You say it's a pretty bold assessment. You say that Susan Rice, then the National Security Advisor to the President, working in the White House, you say flat out, Mr. Speaker, that she sought classified surveillance for political reasons. That's what you said, or correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you just said.
That's what I said. No.
How can you?
Look, I'm a historian by training.
How can you back it up?
Well, first of all, what they have to do is subpoena the documents, find out. As a historian, I don't think these documents happened to show up on her desk because somebody happened to drop by and go, "Oh, Susan, do you think you'd like to look at these?"
The reporting is that she actively sought them, not only on the transition team, but before that. Our Fox News investigators said almost a year she was doing it. So we know that, but we don't know the motive. We don't know the motive.
Oh, come on, Bill. The National Security Advisor has no reason to be listening to her political opponents. It is a total violation of the American system. As I said a minute ago, if it's not illegal, they ought to pass a law to make it illegal. This is very dangerous stuff.
There is a context.
Wait, one more thing.
Go ahead.
Do you really believe that the National Security Advisor, whose office is directly down the hall from the Oval Office, did this for over a year and Barack Obama didn't know about it?
I mean, I believe where the facts take me, okay? But there is, as we discussed last night in detail on this program, there is a rationale because once the emails of John Podesta and others in the DNC became public on a hack, and then once Russia was raised as a possible hacker, then it becomes a national security issue right in her bailiwick. Am I wrong?
Well, look, wait. As a matter of public record, which Peter Schweitzer wrote an entire book about, we know that Bill Clinton got $500,000 for a speech in Moscow. We know that the Clinton Foundation got millions and millions of dollars from Russians. We know that John Podesta's brother, the chairman of the Clinton campaign, his brother's a registered agent for a bank that's largely controlled by Putin. I mean, we know lots of stuff. Why isn't that a national security issue?
But you're dodging the question a little bit, not unlike you. So Susan Rice, National Security Advisor. Let me rephrase it then. Susan Rice, National Security Advisor, gets information that there's a hack going on against Democrats, and Russia may be doing it. doesn't she have to swing into action? That's going to be her rationale. You know it, Mr. Speaker. She's going to say, look, we're investigating this hack, and that's why I had to go in and see who was talking to who.
There is no reason for the National Security Advisor to know who's talking to who unless the FBI or the CIA or the National Security Agency comes in and says, oh, this person's directly implicated. Otherwise, it's just being a voyeur. She has no national security reason to know that. And everybody who's talked about this, the former director of national intelligence, the head of the National Security Agency, the head of the FBI have all said there is no evidence of any collusion between Trump and the Trump campaign and the Russians.
And that's the point, that Ms. Rice had no investigative authority to look at this stuff. She could have asked the Justice Department to do it, and certainly Loretta Lynch would have done it, right? They're buds.
And that it would be totally appropriate for the national security. Go ahead. But for her to know it, for it to be taken to the White House in a form which allowed her to know who the Americans were, and that time when, oh, by the way, they happened to be the opposition ticket, and then they happened to be the transition team of the opposition party. This just, frankly, is an extraordinarily dangerous situation because now you have the entire, this is like some third world dictatorship. You have the power of the federal government looking into what the opposition is doing in a way which, as I pointed out earlier, all of Watergate involved one physical break-in one time. This apparently involves electronic break-ins over months.
Are you going to make a prediction that this story is going to blow up like Watergate did?
Look, the Republicans in the House and Senate, for reasons beyond my comprehension, have allowed this to be defined by the news media in a one-sided way. If they want to look into Russian efforts to shape American politics and they want to look at both parties, that's fine. But for them to allow this to be defined as they look at the Trump administration, et cetera, is crazy. And if they don't go after, all they have to do with Susan Rice is simple. Subpoena all the decision documents, subpoena all the emails, find out who was delivering what to her, when did she know it, and did she give any of it to the President of the United States? Because if Obama was getting this stuff, this is as explosive as Watergate.
I'm hearing Director Comey at the FBI is not cooperating with the investigation, at least on the House side. Are you hearing that?
I don't know if that's true or not. If it's true, they should subpoena him. The director of the FBI is not a petty dictator of law enforcement who is above the Congress. He is a creature of the executive branch, and he has direct responsibilities to the Congress, and he should be cooperating, although, again, the Justice Department, 97% of the donations at the Justice Department went to Hillary Clinton. That's a 32-to-1 ratio of pro-Clinton over pro-Trump in the Justice Department, and I think that has to worry every American also, and might lead us to change back to the Hatch Act and cut off all federal donations from federal employees.
All right, Mr. Speaker, as always, thank you very much. Next.
Joining us now is David Bossie, former deputy campaign manager for President Trump and president of Citizens United. And you working for an outside group. David, always great to see you.
Yeah, hey, David.
Thanks for having me. All right, so let's talk about this latest thing with, since the last time we spoke, about the unmasking, perhaps, that went behind the scenes of the last administration, about maybe even you. National Security Advisor Susan Rice looking to unmask the American One, American Two of the interchange with a foreign entity. And the president indicated yesterday that this might have been criminal.
He didn't even say might. He said it was a crime.
And I totally agree with the president. These are criminal acts by somebody who we know has a history of not telling the truth. Susan Rice cannot be believed. For her to be on television a couple of weeks ago saying, I don't know anything about this, and then in the last couple of days having to admit, well, maybe I did it, but I did it for the right reasons. Look, she is somebody who needs to be investigated. She needs a subpoena. She needs to be deposed. She needs to go before the congressional hearings. She needs before congressional intel committees, both in the House and Senate. And I want to see if there's going to be a grand jury convened for this, because somebody needs to go to jail for what happened during this transition. And the president is exactly right.
Do you think this is just about Mike Flynn's name and just about her?
Oh, well, first of all, I have no idea. Look, there was a lot of us in Trump Tower during the campaign and transition. So it's going to be interesting to see what other names were unmasked. And I think that we're going to have to get, whether it's Dr. Farkas, who made that, blundering, admission to really participating in a conspiracy back, on MSNBC that we've talked about. This thing now, we now see the seeds of what is going on, and we need to dig down and really drill into this. As a former chief investigator for Congress, this is ripe. This is ripe for a congressional investigation. I kind of wish I was back in my old spot, because I'd be issuing a lot of subpoenas over this last few days, I can assure you.
How does it make you feel on a personal level? Do you feel violated at all, knowing that over the last year you were part of the Trump team when he was running? Do you feel like you were listened to or you were surveilled?
I don't put a lot of time thinking about it, but I can tell you, because it's obviously not about me. If I fell into that pool of folks, it'll be a shame, because we were doing the right thing for President Trump at the time during the campaign, and we were doing the right thing for America during the transition, trying to build a government from scratch. And it'll be a real shame if the Obama administration was using that for political advantage.
Gotcha.
Which is what President Trump has said from the beginning.
Sure, and it would be tragic because you weren't talking to any foreign nationals. You were just talking to other Americans. So if they were surveilling you, that would have been a
And if you don't trust Susan Rice, if you say she wasn't telling the truth and it's been proven that she hasn't, your personal information, do you trust your personal information in her hands?
Clearly not. You can, look what this administration has done over 8 years. What the Obama administration did over the 8 years, whether it was investigating conservative groups using the IRS as leverage, we know that they will do a whole host of really bad things for America and for the American people. And this is just President Trump once again has hit the nail on the head.
We'll see where this goes, David. Now let's talk about something else that I found very intriguing. Late afternoon, Steve Bannon, it was announced that Steve Bannon would be removed from the Principals Committee of the National Security Council, and income CIA Director Mike Pompeo, who should have been there to begin with, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dunford, is now back in. And the word is H.R. McMaster had that done. What could you shed light on? Because we also understand that Steve Bannon was so upset he threatened to quit.
Oh, well, first of all, I've spoken to Steve and other members of the senior staff, and that's just factually untrue. The New York Times once again gets it wrong. Steve did not do anything of the sort. Steve has the full confidence of the President of the United States. Look, General McMaster, he has been able to come in and put his own thumbprint on the national security team that he wants to have. And really, Steve Bannon was put on the National Security Committee because the President wanted him there along with General Flynn, his former national security advisor. And I think it was really a check to make sure that the President was being served well and getting all of the right information. The President wanted to really have Steve there just as his eyes and ears. I don't think that that's necessary anymore. I think this is really a nothing burger story at this point. So, the controversy was really Steve being put on.
This is inside the White House.
It's the palace intrigue. Look, they're going to make up something because the palace intrigue is always very strong.
Well, let's go from the palace to Main Street USA. And there was some really good news yesterday regarding the jobs numbers. 263,000 jobs were added in the month of March, which is way up from the 180,000 that were expected. You know what, David? In the last 3 months of this young presidency, close to 750,000 jobs have been created. Something's going on.
Well, it's called optimism, and it's called the markets reflecting the hope that President Trump's policies, economic policies, are going to be put through Congress. And Congress better get with the program. They better start understanding what the American people want. And so these job numbers the last 2 months have been incredible for the President. And that's all based on hope, growth, and opportunity, not based on actual policies yet. So I think that this is really Congress's ball to not stall
because
this
you're worried,
opportunity.
David. It sounds like you're worried because you saw health care fall.
Yeah.
You're worried that the tax cuts might not come as quickly as they need to be or at all because of the interest groups and because Congress, even the Republican Party, is not on the same page.
Yeah, I need to see some congressional leadership here. To be quite honest, they failed dismally on health care. And I put all of the blame on Congress and the congressional leadership on this, not the president. Look, the president came in as a change agent. The president came in as an outsider coming in to change Washington. The people inside of Congress have had years to be ready for an Obama care repeal and replace movement. They had 5 months since the election to get ready, and they couldn't come to consensus. That's all on them, not on the President of the United States, who came in and trusted them to put together the right policies. So, look, I believe that with tax reform, it's essential for America's engine to get revved up. We need to see 2, 3, 4% GDP. We need growth, and it's going to come through President Trump's economic plan.
David, a lot of people are excited about these numbers. A lot of people went to the polls to vote for President Trump because of jobs. They also went to the polls. Many conservatives, many of the evangelicals went to the polls. After that Billy Bush video came out, people said, are you still going to vote for him? And they said yes, because we care so much about the Supreme Court. Neil Gorsuch could get on the bench in 2 days. Actually, could be on the bench tomorrow.
That's right.
How do you feel about that? I mean, this was something that he ran on, and many people went to the polls wanting a conservative on the bench.
It is such a great question, and for me, you know, I worked tirelessly for the president during the campaign, for a lot of reasons, but specifically for the Supreme Court vacancy that was the late great Antonin Scalia. Being able to now fill that seat with Judge Gorsuch is a tremendous undertaking for the president. What a victory for him tomorrow. To be able to show the American people, you know, promise made, promise kept. It's really an opportunity for him to say, you've elected me to take on serious issues, really important decisions, and this is one of my first ones, and I'm so excited that Judge Gorsuch is going to become Justice Gorsuch, hopefully tomorrow.
Does it diminish the victory knowing that they have to do it through through the nuclear option?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I hope the president gets the message, quite honestly, that the Democrats are not the place to go. These people in both the House and the Senate dislike him, despise his policies, and will fight tooth and nail against him at every turn. And so to think that they're going to go along with Judge Gorsuch, it was just I said a fool's errand before. Majority Leader McConnell is doing this exactly right. He's showing the American people through the hearing process, through the Senate process, that there is not one thing to hang your hat on to be against Judge Gorsuch. And these Democrats, for partisan reasons, are simply holding him up, and they're going to go nuclear. And I want to send Chuck Schumer a bottle of champagne if he does it, because I got to tell you, that is something that changes the Senate for the better, because now Majority Leader McConnell can just deal with him the way he needs to be dealt with.
I think like 4 Democrats came over to vote for him. That's what I think. Dave Bossie, thanks so much.